Throughout our world's history, there has been many horrible wrongdoings to groups of innocent people. The Holocaust and other genocides are examples of these horrible periods during our world's history. The article I have chosen for my summative is Grinning and Happy, an excerpt from the novel Obasan by Joy Kagawa. This article recalls and tells about the Japanese internment in Canada during World War II. For Canada, it is a dark chapter in its history, especially because it's a country that strives and prides itself on its ethnical diversity.
We interrupt this program to bring you a special news bulletin. The Japanese have attacked Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, by air, President Roosevelt has just announced.
During the Second World War, after the attack on Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941, the Japanese people living in Canada and the United States experienced hard racism, persecution, and discrimination. At the time, in British Columbia, there was currently around 22,000 Japanese Canadians. After Pearl Harbor, these people were accused of being spies for the Japanese government and other savage crimes. Eventually, they were taken from their homes and were forced to work long, hard hours on farms, railways, and roadways. As well, they had to live in very crowded living conditions. Additionally, these people's belongings were sold along with their houses, properties, and businesses, with the government receiving the profit. Even more horrible was the fact that out of the 22,000 Japanese people wronged by Canada, 75% were in fact Canadian citizens who were born and lived in Canada all their lives. Grinning and Happy is an excerpt in the novel Obasan, which was first published in 1981, one of the first novels to talk about the Japanese internment camps in Canada. At the time, there were still debates going on about these camps and what to do. Since the late 1970s, the Japanese Canadians have been looking for compensation and an official apology from the government. This novel had a huge influence, and later the Japanese Canadians received their formal apologies in 1988, along with an individual $20,000 compensation. The impact when this was first published would have been huge. It would have been very surprising and shocking for its readers, because for many it would have been the first time they've ever heard about the Japanese internment camps. When readers read this now, they would most likely have previous knowledge about the internment camps. Nevertheless, this may still come to a shock for them to realize that within the last century, Canada, a country that prides itself on its diversity, would have such racial periods. In our poetry unit, we learned about different figurative language and literary devices. Some of the very important literary devices and figurative languages used in this piece are, in paragraph 14, the metaphor. In summer, it's a heat trap, an incubator, a dry sauna from which there is no relief. Here, the metaphor clearly depicts the tiresome and wearisome life of the evacuees. It is comparing a well-known thing, a sauna, to their home. The author is trying to invoke the reader's sense of touch, since many people have experienced or have an idea of what the heat of a sauna feels like. The readers can easily relate and imagine how unpleasant it would be to live in there. Repetition is another literary device used. In paragraph 19, she repeats the words whack and flick. Then 3 hands span to the next plant. Whack, whack, and down to my knees again. Pull, flick, flick. The author may have repeated the words to add dramatic effect or to emphasize the hard work and suffering these people had to endure. Lastly, the style of this piece is very interesting and important. The author's writing is full of vivid and descriptive imagery, as well as very poetic language. Additionally, there is many run-on sentences throughout the piece. For example, in paragraph 20, it is one sentence where the author uses 6 ands. This may represent and mirror the endless suffering these people have had to endure. In this course, we spent a great time studying essays. We learned to analyze the hook and thesis as well as find the transition and emphasized words. The placement of the thesis in this article is different than most standard essays. Usually, the thesis is placed at the beginning, in the first or second paragraph. However, in Grinning and Happy, the thesis is the very last line of the article. Grinning and happy, and all smiling standing around a pile of beets? This is one telling. It's not how it was. This is a very strong thesis, and the author chose to put it at the end, which was very effective. By putting the thesis at the end, the author is allowing the reader to experience the article with no forced or preconceived opinion. They are allowed to draw their own conclusion. If she was to put this thesis at the beginning, they would already know what to expect. Novel study. In Grinning and Happy, there is a apparent theme of loss of innocence and innocence wrong. These themes are also present in the novel The Wars. The narrator in Grinning and Happy is a child. She and other children were put in this internment camp, and as a result, they have lost their innocence. This is evident in the way she talks and recalls about her experience in the camps. She tells some details about her horrible experience. She does not try to glorify or sugarcoat it. She lets the reader know how it was and includes each painful detail. This relates to the character Robert Ross, who has also lost his innocence. For both characters, war is the reason they've had to grow up fast. For both characters, wars are the reasons they've had to face hard challenges at such a young age. Because of war, they are forced to grow up sooner than they should have. The other theme present in the article and novel is innocence wronged. In the novel The Wars, the animals are caught between human conflict. Because of this, many animals, such as a hedgehog and toad, have lost their homes. This connects with the situation the Japanese Canadians were in. They too have lost their homes and belongings, even though they are innocent. Their own country turned on them, accusing them of crimes such as being Japanese spies. Another example of innocence wrong in the novel is the horses. These horses were forced to endure hard labor, dangerously close to the bombings and shellings. The humans had no empathy for how scared the horses must have been, and only worried about how the horses' hard labor could benefit them. This relates to the hard work the Canadian government forced the Japanese Canadians. They were forced to work on roads, railways, and farms. In summary, Grinning and Happy is an excellent article which can connect to the whole course. One can analyze the article under literary criticism, look at the many different literary devices and figurative language used, can talk about the different essay structure, and make parallels and connections to the themes of innocence in the novel, The Wars.